VoiceObjects 11. As Sabina said, my name is Dan York, and we will be going through a good bit today to talk about what we've got in store for you with these new releases. First, just a couple of little minor logistics. If you look over on your side of your screen in the GoToWebinar control panel, you'll note that there is a questions area. And you are certainly welcome to ask us questions there. We will get to as many as we can, and we'd love to hear your questions around that. Also, if you are tweeting anything out, we'd love you to use the hashtag Voxeo. And an archive will be available of this webinar at blogs.voxeo.com/jam-sessions after this session is over within the next day or so. So if you have folks who have missed it and they would like to know more, they are welcome to check out the recording. So let's begin and let's get going. For those of you who are new and may not know much about Voxeo, just a quick glimpse that we were founded in 1999. We are, as it says here, the world's largest hosted voice XML and CCXML platform. We have offices around the world. In Orlando, Florida is our corporate headquarters, but we also have offices over in Cologne, Germany, Beijing, China, in San Francisco, in London, in the UK, and employees all around the world. We have 7 data centers. We have our own cloud that we operate that has our equipment on it. And as it says here, we have over 200,000 developers who've been using our platforms. One of the things people often ask about is, so what do people do with Voxeo's platform? And just to give you an instance, here's a bit about some of the types of applications people have built with Voxeo's platform. And as you can see here, they range from anything from very large-scale IVR systems and lots of outbound notification systems of people contacting people in various, for a notification if you've been called about a prescription or your school or something, it might have been that. If you check the order status in some kind of system, it could be using our system. If you've interacted with a customer self-service portal for perhaps your mobile carrier and you used it on, say, a mobile web device or a mobile application or SMS or IM or anything like that, it could be running on our platform. And we do a lot of those different types of things. And everything from very large-scale systems down to, funky Facebook applications that bring people together into a group conferencing system, or alternate reality games have been tied to websites. All sorts of things have been built with Voxeo's platform. Now, one of the things around that, as you heard me mention multiple channels, is we've certainly seen this migration over the years in the way that customers interact with companies, and in what we focus on in particular is self-service and how we can enable people to get information that they would like to do without interacting with an agent. But what we've seen is that evolution going from really just the basic voice and traditional kind of IVR systems up into speech-enabled applications with automated speech recognition, all those different pieces. And then these days, in the past several years, we've watched the migration into text-based channels, where we've had SMS, Twitter, IM, lots of these different ways of people interacting with customers, and then moving on into mobile web environments, and even these days now into actual native apps on iOS or Android platforms, etc. So we've watched this migration occur, and we've been there to support our customers and to help them interacting across these different channels that are here. We have a concept we call unified self-service, which is this idea that you have one environment where you build your applications, one application platform, one deployment platform, and you can use that to go and interact with customers in whatever channel they want to use. And you can build that in whatever applications, however you're working with that. And it can be in a hosted cloud, it can be on your premise or in a private cloud, or it can be a hybrid between the two of those. That's one of the key differences between what we do with Voxeo and a lot of the other solutions that are out there, is that the software that you can download or run in your own private cloud is the same exact software that we run up in our hosted cloud. So when we deploy Prophecy 11 out, for instance, we have deployed it out into our hosted cloud already. It's there now. And so, we're eating our own dog food. We're using our own software. It's all working there. And it is the same software. So you can build an application. For instance, we see customers who will build an app on their local MacBook or their Windows laptop or whatever they're using. They can use it on that. They can build the application on a local version of Prophecy or on VoiceObjects, and then they can deploy it out into a hosted infrastructure. And that's our hosted cloud. It could be yours, but it's up into our environment. It's the same software going between those. That's true of VoiceObjects as well, we have something called VoiceObjects on Demand, which is VoiceObjects hosted in our data centers. So we have this kind of concept that's there. Now, let me talk a bit about VoiceObjects 11. If you're not familiar with VoiceObjects, VoiceObjects is what we call an application lifecycle management suite. It includes a range of tools that let you go with everything from analyzing what the customer requirements are and designing an application to actually building it through a very easy-to-use graphical user interface. Lets you go and build an application and then document it, test it, and then once it's out there and deployed and people are using it, there's extremely comprehensive analytics that lets you go and understand what's going on with your application, what business tasks are being completed, where are the breakdowns, what can happen in that, and feeds that back into the process where you can analyze it again, improve your design, be constantly tuning and working with it. It is as we call it, a lifecycle management suite, and that's what it allows you to go and do. Now, part of this VoiceObjects is really a premier in this whole concept of designing it once, deploying it anywhere, and working with people across multiple channels. We do have customers out there now, large customers like T-Mobile and many others, who are using us in an environment where they have an app that is interacting with people across various different channels, all tying this into a common database, a common info store, a common pace with that. And you can do things like understand, from the customer and their interaction, be able to pull back into the database and personalize the experience. So, if they enter their account number and for instance, they only have, if you're an insurance company, they only have auto insurance with you. Well, you can personalize the experience so they don't hear the options about life insurance or home insurance or things like that. So you can really drive a lot of personalization, a much better experience. And in the end, the goal is obviously to get people information as fast as possible, which you want. And this is a strength of VoiceObjects. VoiceObjects also has, again, this beautiful ability to collapse silos. A lot of people are working in multi-channel environments today, and they've got one group that's building an SMS interaction. They've got one group that's building an IVR interaction for voice, and one group is dealing with the web, and then you've got like the marketing group offering around with social media. And so it's a very disconnected group. So if you want to be able to understand how you're interacting with customers, if you want to be able to have cross-channel interactions, so when somebody SMSs in their account number or something, and then they decide to escalate into a call, you want to be able to save that information so you're not having them enter it twice. All of those things. In many existing environments, it's hard to do that. With VoiceObjects, you can bring it all together into one common environment, one common system, so you can be able to work with this and deploy it across all of those different channels. You also can very easily hook that back into existing business intelligence systems. If you have IBM Cognos, SAP, Oracle, any of those types of systems, you can connect that all in there, be able to work with it, get analytics, get reports in real time, and also in later examination, be able to go and work with that to drive those kind of interactions across all of those different channels. We also, these days, of course, you want to bring that down to your mobile experience. So we've worked to provide the kind of feedback and analytics in a mobile environment with iPhones and iPads and other devices like that, so you can be able to work with this. Now, let's talk about VoiceObjects 11 in specific. Now, one of the things we looked at with VoiceObjects 11 was how could we help people deploy at a very large scale? Because we've had customers who've been using VoiceObjects literally to deploy thousands of ports, and they've started to deploy those across large data centers, large networks of data centers, and they've had them out in their own data centers, up into cloud centers, into individual small sites, all sorts of places, and they've said, how can we go and easily manage all of these different sites we have deployed all over the place, all over the world, and all over the network? And so we said, well, let's make that go and work right now. And so to make it large, and so the question, of course, is how large do you go? And the answer that we've come up with so far is, well, at least 20,000. And in fact, it could go even much larger, that you could do this. Now, the reason I say 20,000 is because we've actually only tested up that far. It could go even much higher. And we have a large customer in North America who's deployed this across 15,000 ports. We have a large service provider in Europe who's deployed this across 9,000 ports. It's amazing what you can do with this, because one of the benefits you get is the ability to go and do one-click deployment of an application. If you have a new version, if you used your analysis, you determined that there's a way that you could go and help people have a much better experience, and you want to just go and deploy that quickly, you can just go and with literally a click, deploy it across seemingly 20,000 different servers, different ports that are out there. And if you have a problem, you can also do one-click rollback. So you've got the ability, whoops, somebody skipped something in Q&A and we can't accept credit cards or something. Well, let's go and roll that back and be able to go and do that. So with VoiceObjects 11, the big thing we've brought in is this ability to go and support this across multiple data centers, and this could be in a WAN environment, MPLS environment, VPN environment, could be across the public internet, could be a combination of all of the above. So you've got this centralized operation administration management environment, and you've got all that. We said large customer wins, efficiency, all of that. If we take a look at a little bit more here, you're able to go and work with the connections of any type, like I said, cross-site failover. We have what we call the virtual control center, which brings us all together into one place. And very resilient, high availability, all focused around this. Here's what it can look like. You can use from your control center, you can be able to work with individual sites. So in my picture here, I've got one of Orlando and one of Las Vegas, or I can bring it together into a virtual control center, which shows me the status of all of my servers across all of the various different places where they may be located. And then I can be able to go and do my deployment and work with it here. This wouldn't be a developer jam session if I didn't have the obligatory network diagram. So here's what it can look like here, is you might have your data centers where you have various different IVR media servers deployed, which could be Prophecy. Voxeo's Prophecy is, of course, a great companion with VoiceObjects. But VoiceObjects also works with about 30 other different IVR and media server platforms. So it doesn't have to be Voxeo's IVR platform, but it can be meant, anything that can support VoiceXML, CCXML, or the different platforms that are there. And VoiceObjects does support, as I said, over 30 other different platforms. So, but this is what it can look like. You've got different data centers connected out to the PSTN. You've got VoiceObjects server clusters that are running some number of ports on them. And then those are brought back all into a central management console where you're being able to look at all of that. And you can see here pieces around the info store and the other pieces that help enable this to go and work across a true multi-site environment like this. Now, it's great that you can deploy it across multi-site, but you also need to be able to analyze what's going on. And so we brought all that capability into, again, the centralized management console. So you can be able to look at this and see in real time where are the connections happening, what's happening in the application itself. Where are the points that I might be able to go and tune my application and be able to work with this? Where can I see alerts? Are a certain number of people zeroing out of the application at a certain place, or are they failing to complete this particular business task? What do I need to do to be able to go and tune my application and provide the best possible customer experience? And how can I go and do that? So all of that is available here, and I can bring that back in and look at it either in real time, or I can be able to go and look at it post-mortem and be able to see historically and look at trends and be able to see where is this going. So another picture here, again, showing, for all of that access, you can track this all in what we call our info store to be able to know the success, the failure, the time. All of these different pieces can be part of what you've got inside of VoiceObjects. So this is the big part of what we're offering with VoiceObjects 11, is this ability to go large, to have this centralized management, one-click deployment, one-click rollback, one-click redeployment, this analysis across X thousand ports that you may have out there in some way, shape, or form. So that's the major parts of VoiceObjects. You can go and get started for free right now to developers.voiceobjects.com. You can go there and download it for Windows, Linux, or Mac OS X. You can be able to work with it and experience what VoiceObjects is all about. Obviously, to work on a larger scale like this, you can certainly talk with us and we can help you out with the configuration and get that going, but that's what you can do. It's all Eclipse-based. If you're familiar with using Eclipse for developing applications, it's a graphical user environment to be able to work with it. If you look at our Jam Sessions page, which I'll put up the URL a little while later, but it's blogs.voxeo.com/jamsessions. We've done a number of jam sessions recently around VoiceObjects and what you can do with it. You can see some good examples in the demos and the slides that we've done there about how you can be able to work with it and use it. We also have some great free training available through Voxeo University where you can learn more about how to build VoiceObjects applications. So that's the big news about VoiceObjects 11. Going large, central management, central deployment, central analytics around X thousand ports, tens of thousands of ports that are out there. So with that, I want to move on and talk about Prophecy 11. And if you have any questions, again, please do raise them in the GoToWebinar control panel. I see a couple of questions coming in already, which is fantastic. And so I'd love to be able to talk about those a bit more when we get to the Q&A session at the end of this, and we'll have plenty of time for that. So, so the question is now with Prophecy 11. Let me go into talking about that. One thing you'll notice for those who may be looking at it is that we have a new logo. Not a big deal for some of you, I realize, but for us it's cool. We haven't actually had a logo for Prophecy over the years, but we do now. But let's talk about what Prophecy is all about on the serious side. First of all, Prophecy is our primary media server, IVR server, application server for building communications applications. It's been with us now for 11 years. This is the product that we built. It does literally download and install in minutes, and this is a huge difference from so many other platforms out there. I mean, this morning I wanted to make sure I had the most recent version of my MacBook just to test something, so I literally just went to the site, downloaded it. It was on my system in just a few minutes. I ran through the install screens, and it was literally it was 5 or 10 minutes for me to be up and running with a functioning application platform that I could literally call into right there using a SIP phone on my laptop to be able to connect in and work with it. As it says, scales from 2 ports to tens of thousands. We have gone through extreme measures to make sure it's voice XML and CC XML compliant, call control XML if you're not familiar. We're very involved with standards. Several Voxeons, as we call ourselves, our CTO, RJ Auburn, Dan Burnett, and somebody else in our group are very involved with the voice XML and CC XML standards. So we're all about open standards and making sure that we support those. Our platform is all IP-based too. It all uses IP protocols like SIP and MRCP, so it can work with the latest unified communication systems, IPPBXs, other pieces like that. And it has support for traditional CTI, screen pops, all of the different integrations that you would have there with Cisco, Aspect, Genesis, lots of different players like that. So that's a bit about Prophecy. And now let's talk about what's new in Prophecy 11. There's 3 big features that we brought in really within Prophecy 11. One of those is wideband audio, also known as HD audio. And just to talk about that for a minute, if you think of your traditional voice, the normal human voice that we have a wide range of frequencies that we can be able to use. And typically a human can hear from 20 to 20,000 hertz. And we have this very wide range that we can talk with. And I'm showing here a waveform from a typical audio editing tool. But the challenge that we have in voice in general is that the PSTN, the Public Switch Telephony Network, which is what we call narrowband communication, only takes a slice of that rich audio frequency range and transmits that. And that's a sound that we hear on the phone, right? When you pick up the phone and you call somebody, there's that phone sound. The movies play that, right? When they play the sound call from the phone call from somebody, they cut the audio so you hear it like it comes across as a sound. That's the phone sound we're all used to. And in the tech world, we talk about this as narrowband. And you might say, well, so why do I care? Well, with wideband, there's a wide range. I've listed some of them here, but if you've ever used, for instance, Skype, which many of us have used, you have that feeling when you get a good Skype connection that you're right there with the person. You're right there. You can hear them. It's like you're right next door to them practically. You can go and listen and hear that. Now, beyond that, there's a whole bunch of technical reasons. Richer understanding, better, clearer. If people are not native English speakers, but they're speaking English to you, and in my case, you can get a much clearer sound there. There's a number of studies around how much longer people will be able to spend on a phone call, for instance, when they're using wideband, because it's less fatigue. Your brain isn't trying to figure out what was that, what did they say, what was that, all of that. On a technical level, we get into some things around speech recognition, voice biometrics, things that use samples of voice. And with wideband, there's the potential that they can have a much higher accuracy because of the fact that there's a much richer sample. Let's talk about what that means. Okay, so first of all, to use wideband, we obviously have to use voice over IP because we can't use the PSTN. We can't use traditional telephony. We have to go over the IP network. Now, it could be using SIP. It could be using some of the other different technologies that are out there. There's some technology happening in the mobile world, in 3GPP, and some of the networks that are being deployed there, where people are using, again, wideband audio over connections over the mobile network. You see it in a lot of the unified communication systems, the IP-PBXs that are being deployed into enterprises where they're using that. And a lot of soft phones are now supporting wideband audio. So again, I mentioned human hearing is 20 hertz to 20K, and that's narrowband. For the PSTN, it's 300 to 3400 is the range that the PSTN chops out of there. So it's just this narrow range that people can go and use. For wideband audio, depending upon the codec, the audio codec that you're using, it can range from 50 hertz to 7,000. So you're going from 20 to 20,000 for human hearing, and now you're at 50 to 7,000. So that's a pretty good range in there. Some of the codecs can even go a little higher. They have a wider range of frequencies they can support. And they also support a different level of sampling. When you think of an audio clip that you're listening to, a typical narrowband is only sampling at 8 kilohertz. And so what's happening is it's taking little samples of the audio path or audio, the frequency range you're getting, and you're getting a waveform. It looks like this. Well, what happens in wideband is it increases the sampling rate so that you wind up with taking more samples, and this is part of why you get that clearer sound that you get in wideband. So part of it is the wider frequency, part of it is the wider sampling rate. And here's some examples that you can see. G711 is the standard that we have for narrowband over IP, and 729 is compressed narrowband. Then you start looking, there's some of these, G722, 22.2, Speaks, Silk. There's a new one coming out of the Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF, called Opus, which is a work in progress that's going on within the codec working group. It's trying to come up with an open source, an open standard for wideband. So there's a lot of different widebands that are out, or codecs that are able to work out there. So for Prophecy, what we've brought in there is we support a number of them. G722 is kind of the basic that we support. And then we also support the Speaks codec, which is being used in a number of soft phones and tools out there. We support AMR wideband, or also known as G722.2, which is being used in 3GPP and mobile environments. And we also do support wideband conferencing. Now, to mention a little bit of how this works, what you do inside of there. I mean, here's just a picture. I was calling it off of my iPad. I'm using I think this is Bria's soft phone, their Counterpass soft phone. Now, Counterpass Bria soft phone. Let's try that one. And it was just connecting in, and you can see here it shows me that I'm connecting into Prophecy using G722 at 16 kilohertz, so it can work with that. So it works. This is real. This is live. You can go and do this. So to configure wideband, you need to go right now down into the config files, the XML files, and this is something we're looking at how we make this a little bit cleaner to work with in the future. But for now, you go and you edit the configuration files, and what you do is the default priorities, here's what it looks like. By default, Prophecy will use G711 as its default, and then it will offer Speaks and some of these. Now, I should mention, what's happened is when you have a SIP connection, the endpoint and the server both send the codecs that they can support, and they offer them, and they say, here's what I can support, and the other one says, here's what I can support, and then they agree on which codec that they're going to use. And this is the priorities that Prophecy will use if it's given the opportunity to do that. And so these are the order that's there. And so what you can do is you can enable that. You can change that around in the configuration file. And there's a config-reference XML file that also shows you how this can work. And you can see on this slide, I have gone and configured, I've added a section to my config.xml file in an area called RTP. And I've gone in there and I've added this area called SDP codecs. And I've put in there the priorities of which codecs I want to go and support from the range that I showed you in the last slide. And so it shows me what they are and in what priority they will be presented. Now, there is also a way I can force Prophecy to use these priorities and to always use this, even if the other one suggests a different ordering. But by and large, this is the way I can present them in the prioritization that I can have here. Now, whoops, wrong direction. Here we go. Also, we do support, as I mentioned, wideband conferencing. Now, by default, Prophecy mixes all conferencing streams in narrowband. And you might say, well, why if you've got this wideband? But let's be honest, right now, the vast majority of calls into Prophecy are going to be coming into narrowband. So it's computationally easier. It's less, less on the machine, on the system to go and mix it all in narrowband. But if you are going to be doing wideband conferencing, all you need to do is go into the config XML and add in one little block that says the default conference sample rate is X. And in this case, as you see on the slide, I put in 16,000, which would do a 16 kilohertz. Now, if I had a lot of clients that were going to be connecting in using the Speaks 32 kilohertz codec, for instance, I could up that up to 32,000, whatever frequency, whatever range I'm going to be using. Now, Prophecy's mixer is pretty sophisticated in this regard, and what it will do is it will go and either downsample or upsample the incoming connections to provide a mix that's necessary. So if you have primarily narrowband clients connecting in, it would mix it there, and then it would upsample it to go and put it out into the wideband, and vice versa. If it's a wideband conference mix and you have one client coming in on narrowband, it would go and downsample that, so it would go out as narrowband. So it does all that. You don't have to even care about it. It just goes and makes it all work in regard to that. So that's wideband conferencing. You just have to configure it there, restart Prophecy, and you're able to start talking and connecting to it in wideband. Again, you need wideband clients. A lot of the SIP soft phones out there, things like Counterpass clients, X-Lite and Bria, and Jitsi, which is it's formerly known as SIP communicator, but it's out there. Zoiper, any of the various different soft phones will be able to work with this in some fashion. I guess that's all I need to say there. You can download the free 2-port version, again, for Windows, Linux, or Mac OS X at this address there, voxeo.com/prophecy, and you can get started with it right now. If you're interested in more details about wideband, I did do a webinar back on June 9th, because we actually rolled this out as part of our 10.1 release at the end of March. But we have a detailed discussion there, and you can go to this URL, and you can be able to listen to what we talked about in that session. There were some excellent questions asked in there as well about how we could go and do that. So I want to move on to the second area that we added in this release, which is IPv6. And to talk about that for a moment, the IPv4, of course, is the address space that we've had forever, as far as in the world of the internet. And it's 192.168.20.12, whatever the addresses are. And we've had this space for a long time. The problem that we've had is that, those addresses are going away. The way IP addresses are allocated is that there's an organization at the top, the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, IANA, which allocates IP address blocks out to regional internet registries, and there are 5 of them, who then allocate them out to internet service providers, who may then allocate them to further internet service providers, who then ultimately allocate them out to your company or to anyone else. And so that's how it works. Well, what happened in February of this year was that IANA ran out of IPv4 addresses. And so what happens is that there's no more addresses to be given, and so we have to do something on a global level. Now, there's a number of different folks who are looking at large-scale NAT and other different ways to go and continue using IPv4. And the migration over to IPv6 is going to take us years, but at this point, we're out of IPv4. We've got to figure something out. And part of the thing is we want to connect a zillion devices, right? We want to put all of our different mobile devices, the things we have. We also want to start connecting up sensors. There's this whole movement called the Internet of Things, where we want to go and put a sensor into every light bulb or every socket. We want to be able to go and monitor it and be able to do all these different things. And so all of this is driving the need for more IP addresses. And so we have IPv6. And here's an address that you could use. They can look big, long, and ugly. They can be very short too, but it's typically 128 bits instead of 32. It's all written in hexadecimal, so it's numbers and letters, and it's separated by colons. Now, I did a whole webinar on IPv6 and what it's all about, and I'll defer you to that. I'll give you a link in a few minutes to show you that. But there's a lot involved with that and a lot of what's going on. the key point here is that Prophecy supports IPv6. So companies that are looking at how do they move their communications infrastructure over to IPv6 for that, we can work with that environment. So you can just drop it in. It is native support. We built that directly in. It's a dual stack, so it can be used with both IPv4 and IPv6, and you can be able to go in that environment. And the configuration process does involve some manual editing of some files. There's a link right here. It goes and show you where you can go and work with that. But that's what you can do with IPv6 to make it work, and it just works. I can call into it over IPv6 on the soft phone. I can connect to it. Note here I do mention Designer and Log Search do not currently work on IPv6, but we will we'll work with that. Here's a screenshot. I've just, because I'm security conscious, I removed part of the IPv6 address, but you can see there I was connecting in, working with it, using it, working with it. It's great. We have a page. If you just go to bit.ly/Voxeo IPv6, we have a long page that has all sorts of information about IPv6 and about some tutorials, some information about how you can get set up in your lab environment to work with IPv6 if you want to try it out using some tunneling technologies. We have some links to some other screencasts and some other pieces and information about that. So that's Prophecy and IPv6. And as I mentioned before, again, I did a jam session not terribly long ago where we were talking about IPv6. And you can learn a lot more about that. And if you want to ask questions, I'm glad to talk about it. As you can perhaps detect, I could talk about IPv6 for way longer than probably most of you even remotely care about. So we'll leave it at that. Now, one other piece, just as we're talking about kind of the future and 2011 and everything else, we're going to jump back a couple decades and talk about fax. And we actually included the ability to integrate fax into Prophecy. We had some customers who wanted to be able to go and receive fax into their media server and to be able to work with it in this environment. And so we do support fax over IP using T38 and TIFF-F files. And what you can do is you can have people connect in and send faxes into Prophecy. And what it will do is it will store those as TIFF files where you can then be able to access and manipulate them. You also can send outbound faxes. So for instance, if you had somebody, and this was a real, somebody who was interested in doing this, somebody call in and place an order through an IVR system that was running on Prophecy and using, placing an order, doing the different things, and they wanted to be able to send out a fax confirmation. Now, of course, with Prophecy, they can also send out an SMS confirmation. They could do other different channels and be able to connect out across that. But they want to be able to do fax. And so what they can do is they can initiate through a CCXML app. They could go and initiate an outbound fax to a number to be able to go and do this. And so we have this capability. We've added one more channel to that list of bubbles that we show around all the different channels with voice and SMS and IM and social and Twitter and all different pieces there. Now we can do fax as well. So you can do inbound. And also, as you note on the slide, we do T38 is the SIP protocols, not SIP protocol, the fax protocol we use, fax over IP. But we can detect the fax tone. If you enable it, Prophecy will start to listen to see that fax tone that we all know and be able to hear that in the audio and then do what's called a re-invite to the other end to go and connect over T38 to receive the actual fax transmission. It does obviously need T38 support to be able to make the connection to the actual PSTN, et cetera, for those for the fax connections. We work with audio codes and a number of other vendors who have provided fax gateways. There are also services out there that online services where you can connect using a T38 connection to be able to go and receive or send faxes that way. There's a bunch more information in our documentation. You can get that at there at the URL that I mentioned here, and you can find it in the Prophecy 11 docs as well. So those are the major things: wideband IPv6 and fax support. Now there was a lot more that we added in the release notes. If you go into the Prophecy 11 documentation, there's some lengthy release notes with all sorts of links that go into a great amount of changes we made. Some of the ones that people using Prophecy may like right off the bat. We have some automated backup and restore capabilities, so you could basically have almost a hot standby, more or less, being able to go and have that automated backup restore. We've done a lot with security and auditing in this release. We've provided some much stronger tools. We created a new role to continue the division of roles so people could be able to provision apps and things, but they wouldn't be able to necessarily to configure the overall system. We've put a lot of new auditing capabilities in. We've added some new tracking. We've added SNMP. There's a great amount that you can go and find in those release notes if you go and do this. So that's Prophecy. You can download a version, as I said before, about voxeo.com/prophecy. I'll mention one other piece too. We did roll out Prophecy 11 into our hosted environment. So if you go to evolution.voxeo.com and start building apps right now, which you can do, it's free to set up an account, free inbound and outbound calling, free ability to go and do it. It does use Prophecy 11 for default. And so you get all the benefits of all the performance improvements we've done, which have been huge in Prophecy 11, among other things. We don't currently support IPv6 wideband or fax in the hosted cloud. We're looking at how we do that over time, but you get all the performance improvements and everything else, and it is a default now. So you will see that. And when you go in and create new apps, Prophecy 11 is there. It's live in hosting. We're using it, and it's quite powerful in what we do. So some next steps that we have before we get into the question and answer. I see a number of good questions that are coming in, which is excellent. So the next steps, we are going to be doing another webinar coming up soon. It is our best practices in voice biometrics. We're going to talk about how you create an effective strategy for user authentication or identification. It will be held on Thursday, September 15th. So we're going to be talking with a partner of ours who's going to be talking about what they do. You can look at blogs.voxeo.com/best practices to see when that is there. And if you've registered for this, you'll also get notification about that webinar as well. You'll also be able to sign up in the future for more jam sessions. We'll have another one in September. We're just finalizing the topic, but it will be coming up, and we have a lot of great stuff to talk about you in October and November as well. So check that out, and again, you can download Prophecy 11 or VoiceObjects 11 for free. Now, I do see a bunch of questions, so let's go to some of those. And again, if you'd like to talk about questions, you can just ask them in our GoToWebinar control panel. And please feel free. We've got a couple in here related to VoiceObjects. No one's pinged me yet on wideband or IPv6. So if you got questions on those, let's start with those. And I'm actually going to bring in a colleague of mine, Andreas Fulmer, because I've got a great question here about could we speak a little bit more about what the analytics are and the analyzer functionality in VoiceObjects 11. And Andreas, who's on the line, is actually a perfect person for me to talk to about that. So Sabina, can you unmute Andreas and let him talk about that?
That's already been done. Hi Dan. Hi, our audience. This is Andreas.
Hey, great.
So,
welcome,
yes.
Andreas.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Dan, you've done a great job in presenting the new VoiceObjects features, VoiceObjects 11. And a major piece of that is obviously the enhancement that we have added to the VoiceObjects InfoStore and Analyzer product. And the thing that is really new when compared to the last versions is the added reporting on back-end response times, error rates, frequency usage, etc. So every back-end access that will be issued from a VoiceObjects application will be tracked in InfoStore with the according response time, with whether it was successful or not, how much data volume was being passed, hence and forth, etc. So that they can get great statistics on performance bottlenecks, and you can then anticipate performance bottlenecks on your backend systems. That was the screenshot that we saw from Analyzer based on that new data. And this was added because many customers actually, when having a production level IVR deployment, they always have some of their backend systems involved in that, a CRM system, ERP system, whatnot, billing maybe. And when there are problems and there are issues with performance or errors, it's always the question which system actually is responsible and which needs to be closely monitored and tuned. And more often not, it's actually some backend system in the portfolio of the customer. So we helped adding insight into this. One of the questions that we got during this webinar is actually asking a little deeper into how to configure the.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and take that one too, if you want to talk about that.
Yes, I was just going to say that's a very technical question. So I wouldn't expect you, Dan, to be able to answer that in no glory details. So the let me read the question or summarize the question. It's really about right, how to activate backend level reporting. Is it configurable at the service level or at specific points in the application? Also, can we turn tracking down, or can we reduce the scope of tracking in order to control the level of data, the amount of data that is being written?
Right.
So,
yeah, you might not want to generate terabytes of data if you could.
Yeah, right. That's always a concern, of course. So what we did at this point is the following: we tied the. Let's start differently. So first of all, it's enabled by default, so you do not need to configure anything on the service level, on the server, anywhere, to get hold of that data. That being said, if you want to reduce the amount of data, what you can do is you can use the a feature that has been there for quite some time now, and that is the so-called data sampling on the level of input states. So you can, for example, instruct InfoStore on the service level to only gather data on an input state level for, say, 1 out of 10 calls. So that would be the 10% setting, or 1 out of 20 calls, that would be the 5% setting. And if you do that, that's what many customers normally do in order to have enough data for understanding the ASR performance and customer experience, but not to get too much data that just eats up their disk space. And this sampling will also apply to the business task data, or sorry, to the back-end related data that is being written. So that's the way. If we see more need in the future for having an independent sampling rate for back-end data, we might as well add that in a future revision of VoiceObjects. But for this, at this point, I think this should be good enough for most, if not all, deployments to control the amount of data. Yeah, I think that was it. I hope the answer was the answer was useful.
No, okay.
And, that's another one for Andreas. Is the server version of VO11 available now? If not, when will it be?
Right, that's another good question. We have started uploading VoiceObjects 11, the desktop for Eclipse or developer edition, to our website for download. And actually, right now, if you go to the website, the only version that you will find there for download is the Microsoft Windows version. We will add the other versions, including the VoiceObjects server version, so the full VoiceObjects platform, in the next couple of days. I don't know a specific date yet, but it's going to take another 1 or 2 weeks, I would think, until we have that uploaded. Okay?
Okay, there's another one for Dan. I know that you will be providing CCXML code in order to implement inbound and outbound faxing. I assume that it supports dynamic faxes, e.g. content of fax is variable. Also, does Voxeo have any plans to create a fax object step in Eclipse to make creation, sending of faxes a single step?
Well, that's a good question. So, well, good couple questions. So, if you go to the page that I mentioned around faxing, it's in the Proxy 11 documentation. We do include there, we include CCXML applications, the actual source code that you can see and you can copy and paste and use to do both inbound and outbound faxes. And so you have that kind of capability. And so with the outbound fax, what you do is you configure in there the path to the TIFF file that's being sent and working with that, and that's part of what's in the CCXML file. So the answer partly goes back to how you build your application. So the CCXML file can certainly look and build a dynamic path or whatever, and then be able to send that TIFF file off. So how you're generating the TIFF file and how you're working with that are going to be pieces that you're going to need to do external to that. But it can go but yes, it can go and do that. So it is possible and build that through that. It would just, your application would have to take care of part of that. As to whether we're creating a fax object step in Eclipse, that's an interesting question. I don't actually know that one. I'll have to talk to our development team around that. And to the person who asked this, I will actually get back in touch with you a bit to understand what exactly you're looking for on that, or what you'd like to build. We, it's interesting. Fax is one of those things that a lot of folks don't want to use, but the folks who do want to use it are very strongly want to use it. There's some very strong use cases and very strong industries where fax is a huge area. And so, this is a case where Voxeo is very definitely focused on what our customers want to hear and what our customers want to see. And so this was a case where several large customers came to us and said, we want to have this kind of fax support inbound and outbound. So as to whether we want to go and build that step in, let's have a conversation and see what makes sense and what we can go and do. Okay. I see another question about what our future is with wideband codecs and whether we'll support Silk or Opus or some of these other ones that are out there. And the answer is that we're certainly watching what happens, particularly IETF around the Opus codec and where that goes, because the idea with that is to be an open source, kind of like a G711 for wideband, in the sense that that G711 is anybody can implement it. It's not patent encumbered. There's no royalties. There's nothing like that. You can go and implement it. And the idea with Opus is that it will be the same kind of idea for wideband. Yet to be seen whether it can all come through IETF and get through the whole process, et cetera, in a form that can work with folks. But so far it looks pretty good. And so as that matures, we'll see. Any of the other codecs that are out there, we'll continue to watch and monitor, and certainly we can discuss that if you've got a certain reason to use one of those. But otherwise, we try to focus on what's available as open standards and what we can provide.
Right, Dan. I've just seen here another question popping in the same context of wideband, and that is more from the VoiceObjects perspective. What does it mean for the VoiceObjects IVR development, or in general for the IVR development, if you have a mixture of wideband and narrowband audiences? So, and if you look into VoiceObjects, you have really two choices. One is to have it all handled transparently by the Prophecy platform, in which case for the audio prompts that you need to define for your IVR application, you just provide the the wideband version of them with the high definition, and trust it to Prophecy to dynamically convert them to narrowband, transcode them to narrowband when needed. And as far as I know, that would even be cacheable on the Prophecy platform. The other option is if you want to avoid transcoding, you would just have to prepare the different sets of those audios in the appropriate encodings and definitions, and have the information at call time being passed from Prophecy to VoiceObjects as to which is the codec that has been negotiated for this very call, for this very session, and maybe to define a layer within the VoiceObjects framework to decide which of those audio sets you want to use for that specific session. So in that case, you wouldn't lose any time, any CPU power on the IVR for transcoding, and have both the best audio experience for each caller and the best performance on your IVR platform.
That's great, Andre. It's a great answer, and that's a perfect topic. We should write that up as a blog post, and I'm making myself a note that we should do that. Also, to the person who asked about the fax questions before, we're going to have a series of blog posts and tutorials coming out around Prophecy 11 and the pieces in that, and I've got a couple queued up around fax in particular. So once we get some demos and pieces out there, you'll see some more that you can be able to work with there. But thanks for that answer there, Andreas. I think that's all I see, Sabina. Do you see more questions coming in?
No, I think that's it for today. So I would like to thank you. Thank you for making this great presentation. Thanks to Andreas for giving additional input and answer a couple of questions here. And thanks to the audience for participating in the jam session today, and stay tuned for the next topic and the next session. Thank you and bye.